Okay. Good evening, everyone. We are very happy to see you all here, and we are very happy that you were not put off by the poster. On the contrary, I can see that you are here. That's great. My name is Dr. Katarzyna Dudek, and I'm an English professor, and this is my husband, Jakub Dudek, a graphic designer, a father, a YouTuber, a podcaster, and the author of this poster. We are very delighted because we have the chance to get to know you better, and today we will be talking about fools. We've thought that this is a nice topic for a summer session because, well, I guess that you might be a bit overwhelmed with squeezing 15 weeks into 3. So let's talk about folly today. But before we start our talk, let's pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Saint Philip Neri, pray for us, the patron of joy and laughter. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Just to give you a short introduction, I would like to begin with a quote from King Lear. Have you read King Lear? You are more or less familiar. For those of you who are not familiar, a short synopsis. King Lear, the play by Shakespeare, begins with a flattery contest. So you have the king who decides to give away his kingdom to this daughter who will express her love best. So basically, the one that flatters him most gets the kingdom. Well, the idea is in itself insane, and in the course of the play, we see how Lear is embraced by madness more and more, and how we see how he loses his identity. And at some point, he actually loses his kingdom, he loses his daughter that loves him best, but one that does not express that, but loves him through her actions. And he is thrown away into the storm, and this is the scene where the storm rages around Lear, the storm rages in his heart, and the words that he says out of bitterness and disappointments are the following. A child cries when a child is born into the world, because the child enters this stage of fools. And of course, Lear is bitter here. When he says fools, he means idiots. He means that all people live meaningless lives. He means, or for him, fools, of course, the sense is nonsensical. This life doesn't make sense. People do not know what they are doing. We are all in the storm. We are all in darkness. Today we will try to challenge our commonsensical understanding of folly, of who a fool is, and we will try to see, or we will try to go from a general commonsensical understanding of folly to a more symbolic understanding of the fool as a literary trope, as an archetype, and the symbolic function of the fool in culture and society. This is still an introduction. Let's listen to a philosopher, a saint, and a poet that will give some additional insights into foolishness and will help us to live, or will help us to see the dichotomy of folly or fools. The title of today's talk is taken from whom? Praise of Folly, Erasmus of Rotterdam, who was a Renaissance philosopher, and he wrote a satirical work on Folly. The title was Praise of Folly, so hence the title of our talk today. And in his work, he challenges this dichotomy between wisdom and foolishness. The speaker of this work is personified Folly, and of course, Folly pokes fun at certain human behavior and certain social groups, especially clergy of the time. But there is also this biblical lesson that comes in this work, namely that this is folly to adapt Christian life. So this is philosopher saying. Saint Anthony the Great give some insight also into folly and madness by reversing our understanding of folly and madness, and he said, a time is coming, and somehow maybe you can already sense that this time that is coming is also coming now, it's coming for us. A time is coming when men will go mad, and when they see someone who is not mad, they will attack him saying, you are mad, you are not like us. Right? So the question is, who is really mad? Who is a real fool? So, philosopher, saint, and now a poet. T.S. Eliot in The Family Reunion gives a similar description of the situation, like fools poking at fools and accusing them of being fools. In a world of fugitives, the person taking opposite direction will appear to run away. And what Eliot means here is that we are all fugitives, we are all running away from God, and those who turn back to seek beauty are those who are accused of running away. And those who are accused of running away, those who are accused of being foolish, are, as another poet says, mystics, monks, and poets. This is introduction. And now, the aim of our talk is, as I said earlier, to show the symbolic function of the fool in culture and society. So first, we would like to present to you certain figures of literary and cultural fools, like jester, trickster, clown, and holy fool. And then, as we will be discussing those different figures or different aspects of the fool, we will try to highlight certain key elements, key aspects, which will help us to discuss those functions of the fool in society later on. So let us start with the jester. We know who jester is, right? Jester was the one who worked on the royal court. He was the source of entertainment. He had the license to talk with impunity, right? And here you can think of the First Amendment. He had the right to say freely anything and everything, right? He was allowed, I'm saying he because usually the jesters were men, or the jesters were allowed to express more. They were allowed to cross certain cultural norms, and all this to remind the king that he should not take himself too seriously. And as long as the king allowed the jester to tell the truth, the king could not be accused of tyranny, because his ears were still open to some kind of insight, some kind of truth. And just to give you two literary examples and highlighting a bit more what the role of the jester is, because of course such a figure as a court jester was a
Enjoy. Sorry.
The court jester became a stock character in literature, and in Shakespeare, in many of his plays, there is the figure of the jester. And when you think of Hamlet, is jester one of the key characters that come to your mind? Maybe yes, maybe not. Where can we see Jester in Hamlet? Does anyone remember? Well, the Jester is dead. Many people are dead at the end of the play, but the very fact that the Jester is dead, but still he speaks and he talks in a way, metaphorically, to Hamlet is very important. The Jester, the role of the Jester on the court was, as I said, to remind the king not to take himself too seriously, or themselves too seriously, but also to remind that we are all transient, that we will all die, and so will the king. So the role of the fool on a court was not only to make jokes and cause laughter, but also to remind of our human finitude and mortality. And this idea for us in our culture may seem a bit morbid because we keep on repressing death, right? And the Jester was there to say memento mori. And Hamlet, as he sees at the skull of Yorick, there is this change in him. From this time on, he will rely more on providence rather than being driven by urge to kill his father, a murderer. So, Jester and death, first association. Then again, King Lear. In King Lear, there is the character of the fool. And that's an extremely funny character, but what is important is that the fool is allowed to tell the truth. So we associate the fool with the truth. And the fool in King Lear tells the truth without any decorum. When King Lear disinherits Cordelia, the only daughter that loved him truly, this is the fool that tells him that he's doing wrong, that he is reversing the order, that he is becoming the son of his own daughters, that he is confusing good and evil, and he does it in the most hilarious way. He says, you put down your breeches and you let yourself be spanked by your daughters. And he says to him very directly, you are nothing. You are O without figure. So O without the figure is nothing. You are nothing. But there is more to this character, because the fool is one of the few characters who are faithful to Lear. So when Lear is thrown away by his evil daughters, the fool is the one that follows. So again, we associate the fool, the figure of the fool, with faithfulness. The fool is not to rebel against authority. The fool is not to begin a revolution. The fool is to keep the order, to keep the hierarchy, but to make sure that hierarchy does not turn into tyranny. But in King Lear, we see that fool is faithful. And the next association is that with nakedness. Of course, on a metaphorical level, the jester on the court is there to say the king is naked, so he is the one to say the truth. But also in the play, we see how the characters strip themselves of their clothes. And okay, with nakedness, with next association, I will explain that later, just not to confuse it too much now. Let us now turn to the next embodiment of the fool, namely trickster.
Okay, so the trickster is a figure that seems a bit evil at first, but it's not necessarily evil. It's just that their actions are rather unpleasant, because the trickster is able to put into light or draw attention to a person's drawbacks or faults or vices. And a trickster is a very special figure because it's from two worlds. It's like in between, it lives between two worlds. If there's an established hierarchy of sorts, the trickster does not fit the hierarchy. It's rather at the end of it, guarding this established thing, whatever it is, from the outside world where there is chaos and things that are really unknown and strange. The trickster is often present in folk tales or myths. Like, I don't know if you know, does anyone know any Native American myths or folk tales? There's this figure of a coyote often that does some tricks to people. And trickster is often also a shapeshifter, since he is from two worlds or from in between the worlds. He's a shapeshifter, so can change into other beings. For example, a good example of a trickster is Loki from the Avengers. You probably know him. So he is like from two different worlds. He's not the same race as Thor, right? And he can also change his shapes, and he can also disrupt whatever plans everyone else has, right? So that's the figure of a trickster. And something very similar to a trickster is a troll. So a troll in mythology is a being, it's a kind of a monster that protects or guards the bridge. So just as we said before, the person from in between two worlds, right? So there's a bridge between those two worlds, and the troll is a being that guards it. So it is in the troll's power to let some chaos into the hierarchy, or let some order out of the hierarchy. And we can say that in real life, symbolism like that just happens. And it's not a coincidence that, for example, an internet troll is a troll. Because if someone is not just a hater, let's say, but a troll, an actual troll, they see some established order, and they turn it around in a way to disrupt it so that it doesn't work anymore, because they let in some chaos. They are the chaotic force of nature in the internet, let's say. Also, it works everywhere, let's say. If you have a medieval church, you have all the order is on the inside, but the walls of the church are guarded by gargoyles, right? Which are like those monsters that protect the inside from the world outside, right? So you can even see it in architecture, because symbolism is really pervading every aspect of our lives in this way. Okay, next we have a clown, and there are many types of a clown. But generally a clown is a joking person, and a good clown, a clown that really works properly, is the one that is always the ultimate victim of his own jokes. So a clown may joke, may tease a person, but ultimately he is the joke's on him. But there are those negative aspects to the clown, that he really knows the human nature, and he really sees. It's similar to the trickster in this respect, that the clown sees a person's faults. So and he can put them into the light, like he can attack the weak, the soft underbelly of a person, so that the person feels really bad when they are teased by the clown. And there are more serious types of clowns. There's an harlequin, or a Pierrot, which is who is more like stern and melancholic. he can be called a man of sorrows. So being a clown, but also the sad clown, right, with a tear here, who really like attaches himself to the negative emotions or the negative things. Like someone with depression can be teased by this kind of sad clown, right? And then we have those serious clowns like the Joker from Batman, right? Or Pennywise from It, who also know the weakest spots of a person so that they can attack them. They are not the clowns proper, because the joke's not on them in the end, or unless in some stories it is. But they are also clowns in the way that they know the weak spot of a person and they use it for their advantage. Okay, and then again, in our life, everyday culture, symbolism happens. And does anyone know Pepe the Frog? Yeah? And there is also a variant of it which is called Pepe the Clown or the Honkler. Are you familiar with that little thing? So again, it is not a coincidence that this character is a frog, because frog is an amphibian that lives between the two worlds, right? Between the land, which is land is symbolically represented as the order, and water, which is chaos, basically. So it's well, not getting too much into the meaning of whatever is going on with Pepe the Frog on the internet, right? But it's a frog, and it's not a coincidence. And now it's time for the ultimate holy fool.
And now, holy fools. Holy fools, or fools for Christ. This term derives from St. Paul, and I'm sure that you are familiar with those passages from the first letter to Corinthians. Just to remind you a few phrases, few passages. We are fools for Christ, for the wisdom of this world is foolishness in God's sight, for the message of the cross is foolishness. For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. So these are all phrases, passages from various chapters of the first letter to Corinthians, and they show Christianity as this religion of dramatic reversal. Right? What is weak becomes strong, and what is strong becomes weak. What is foolish becomes wise, and vice versa. And holy fools represent this form of ultimate humility. Especially this type of religious practices was very vivid in the Eastern Orthodox Church, and it came under the name of Urodivi. So this is a Russian version of foolishness for Christ. Those holy fools acted intentionally in a foolish way, of course foolish in the eyes of man, and very often they were taking on the guise of insanity to somehow take the eyes of the man from their own sainthood. So they would exaggerate different acts of self-humiliation. They were going around half naked, they were homeless, they were speaking in riddles, and because that was such a common practice in the Orthodox Church, no surprise, the figure of the holy fool enters literature, and we can look at Dostoevsky just to find some examples of holy fools. And just to give you those examples, we can think about, for example, we can think about Dostoevsky's The Idiot. Right? Of course, the name itself makes us think about fools. The Idiot places the main character, epileptic Prince Mishkin, into secular world which is dominated by vanity and self-interest. Mishkin himself is a well-educated gentleman. He's a wealthy prince. He lost his immediate relatives, and due to his condition, he was epileptic. He spent years in Switzerland in a kind of clinic. When his name, Lev Mishkin, also somehow addresses the dichotomy of the world idiot, like who are the real idiots, who are the real fools in this novel, because Lev means lion and Mishkin relates to mouse. So you have, again, strength and weakness in one, folly, foolishness and wisdom in one. And this is actually what Prince Mishkin represents in the novel. He's perfectly beautiful, perfectly good. He can be characterized by innocence and insight and compassion. He doesn't have any sense of pride. He doesn't want to be admired. He doesn't want to be respected, and he takes no insult on anyone. And he is ready to lay his own life for the sake of saving one. So there is the girl, Nastasia, and moved by deep sorrow for her, Mishkin wants to restore her dignity. He wants to bring her back to the world through the act of love, even though he is not in love with her. There is no question of romantic love. He's just moved deeply by her suffering. And the whole society, knowing Mishkin as he is, thinks that he is just stupid and naive. How come you can chase this girl? How come you can take no offense on people trying to rip you off money? How come you are just so good? And he becomes the scapegoat in the novel because he turns mad. He cannot understand this world anymore. And even when I'm just telling you this, I have just goosebumps because the world is not ready. The society of vanity is not ready to accept the one who is just simply good. So he is the holy fool of the idiot. And another character who is a holy fool in Dostoevsky is Sonia Marmeladova in Crime and Punishment. In short, Crime and Punishment is a story of a murderer who somehow gets to discover that what he did, namely murdering an innocent woman, is a sin, not a crime. And once he discovers that that was sin, he is ready to convert his heart. And this is Sonia, a prostitute, who makes sure that Raskolnikov finds his way towards redemption. Her name, Sonia, means wisdom, right? Sophia, wisdom. She is wise in her acts of love. Even though she is a prostitute, even though she is the lowest of the lowest in this society, even though her body was defiled, her soul was intact at any point. So all the religious themes in this novel are somehow centered around her, and she embodies this perfect human love. When Raskolnikov confesses to her, the first words that she says are, "What did you do to yourself?" Not, "What have you done? What did you do? You're a monster." What did you do to yourself? What have you done to yourself? Because she sees that this murder that Raskolnikov committed also harmed him. Because he tarnished the image of God in his own heart. And now, as a sinner, he is most miserable of men. And not only that, this holy fool, this Sonia, is ready to follow Raskolnikov to make sure that he repents and to make sure, by just acts of simple love by being there for him, that he finds his way towards God. She is ready to take the responsible for the sinner and to co-suffer with him. So what the lesson that she gives us is that the real wisdom is to pray for the sinners and to love them in their sin. There is another interesting holy fool in this novel, and this is Lisaveta. She is the one that is murdered. She is the woman of a very simple mind who was mistreated by her sister, but also a woman of great devotion that discovered with Sonia, or was discovering with Sonia, the world of faith. So those holy fools are connected, and they both bring Raskolnikov to God. Raskolnikov listened to the world of God through Sonia, who reads out of Lizaveta's Bible to him. So at some point, the murderer and the victim are united through this holy fool. So those are examples from Russian literature. Has anyone perhaps seen the Russian movie by Pavel Lungin, The Island? Ostrov is the Russian title. If you haven't seen it, it's a movie from 2006. I really recommend this one to you because that's another movie with the character of the Holy Fool in it. You have, yes, Father Anatoly, who behaves in the most strange fashion throughout the movie, but he is also the prophet, and he is also the one who is in the process of penance for the sins of his past. So that's our recommendation. Those characters teach us that humanity is restored through love and sacrifice, and this is the role of the Holy Fool. And if we go again to King Lear, Cordelia and Edgar are the two examples of Holy Fool in King Lear. At some point, they are both, it is inherited, they are both turned to nothing, and they both come back to save their fathers, respective fathers from insanity. So both Cordelia and Edgar are examples of redemptive, unconditional, kenotic love. They are ready to empty themselves. Cordelia dies in the end, and this death restores her father back to sanity, in a sense. Her love restores him back to sanity, and her death teaches him that love is more than flattery. This is the Lear from the beginning of the play. The Lear, at the end of the play, knows what love is. Love stronger than death. Edgar becomes full in the course of the play. He strips himself out of clothes. He goes around naked, and this is his disguise. And under this disguise, he's able to save his father. So, as I said, they were turned to nothingness. And through nothingness, through this kenotic love, they were able to redeem their loved ones. And just to finish this thread of holy fools, of course, our church has this tradition as well, these traditions of self-abasement and intense self-depreciation, yes. Some example, one of the examples would be Saint Philip Neri, the patron of today, who, just to somehow guise his intense sanctity, he would walk around in large shoes. Once he shaved half of his beard. He was famous for making jokes. He would dress in bizarre costumes. So all that to become the fool for Christ. Some other examples. Kuba's favorite, Saint Simeon Salas, who was known to drag a dead dog behind him. But these are extreme examples, right? Some of them, some saints would choose the lives of homelessness, but aren't all saints fools for Christ? And of course, the one in the poster, Saint Francis, didn't he strip himself naked to show the garments of light, right? The garments that Adam and Eve were wearing in paradise before fall, in a way. We have Saint Faustina as a simple girl, right, who became fool for Christ. So holy fools are associated with humility, with the love of God, with wisdom of the cross. And now, we can ask the question, do we need fools, and what do we need fools for?
Okay, and this leads us more into the symbolic meaning of the fool. The fool is the one that flips everything around, flips things upside down. So, but let's start at the beginning, right? You can see time as being cyclical, right? There's a day, a week, a year, and at the end of the cycle, there is a little plunge into chaos, a little plunge into death, because chaos is also connected to death. Like, for example, the night. You go to sleep, you lose your consciousness, so it is like a little death. Again, the Sabbath is also a time of idleness, when you don't work, when you don't act, so it's also a little death. And for the year, we have the carnival. The carnival is a time when the hierarchy gets so corrupt, it flips over, everything plunges into chaos, everything is strange, everything is spinning around fast. And then when the carnival ends, we have the flip back into the normality, and a new cycle, let's say, starts. The time of penance, the time of work, the regular time. And all the fools are the ones that flip, right? So in the time of order, let's say, the fool is the one that disrupts the order. So something was working properly, and then comes the fool, the trickster, and he disrupts this order. But in the time of carnival, in the time when everything is flipped around and when everything seems upside down, the world is like behaving opposite to what it should. The clown may be the person that flips this upside down hierarchy back into normality. And this is the function of the clown or of the fool, that can flip something that is upside down into its proper way. For example, and that is going to be an outrageous example, so please suspend your outrage. Back in the day, and this is also true for the trickster, for example, the shapeshifter. When you have a shapeshifter, also their gender is unclear, and their sexuality is also unclear, right? Because they can change from one to the other. And a person like that in the past, like a homosexual, let's say, could be considered a trickster or this kind of a clown, because that was the person that wasn't fitting the normal hierarchy, right? But in the time when you have the Pride Month, which is coming any day now, where all the biggest corporations in the world change their logo into these into the rainbow flag, right? Also, in the name, the gay person, the gay used to mean happy, right? Jolly. In a time like that, is any one of you familiar with the person of Milo Yiannopoulos? He's a very promiscuous homosexual figure, but a right-wing activist who, for the year, but he's also Catholic of Jewish origin, of Jewish descent. Yeah, so he's like this person that is an amalgam of all the different things of opposites, right? A gay right-winger who is Jewish and Catholic at the same time. And for the year of Saint Joseph, he decided to live a chaste life. Decided to try to be chaste for this year. So in a time which we can call an upside down world, when everything is flipped upside down, a person that does something normal can be the fool or can be the trickster, right? Can be considered the game changer, right? So has any one of you seen The Hunchback of Notre Dame? There is a short scene there, like 2 minutes long, where there is this kind of a carnival parade going. And you can see all the flips in there, like there's a lobster carrying a man in a tank or in some water. And there's a person that flips and is once a king and then a fool and then the king again and then the fool. All those things are present there in the span of like 2 minutes. And they make Quasimodo their king, like the king of fools. So he is a king for a moment, but then they like throw fruit at him and he ends up really humiliated and like a scapegoat. Is there maybe another king that was laughed at, was made fun of, with a crown of swords and a scepter of swords, who was in the end laughed at and humiliated? Does anyone come to your mind, maybe? So, in a time of the upside down, in the time of tyranny, a fool can bring back the order, the proper order. And when we have when we see the jester at the court it being killed, we know that we live in a tyranny. So whenever you see some things that you cannot make fun of, you cannot laugh at, you know that these things are part of a tyranny. So whenever you have someone being cancelled, maybe, you can see that there are those things that cannot be made fun of, which means that something is upside down, because even kings should be and can be made fun of. And when someone makes fun of the church, for example, that's not necessarily the worst thing that can happen, because this means that the church is not a tyranny if you can make fun of it. Okay, so we started talking about Christ, right? A second ago. As outrageous as it may seem, we can look at Christ as the fool, the trickster and the clown. He tricked death itself, and it was flipped into life. He came to this very orderly world with its rules and its law, and he told people to eat his body and drink his blood. completely disrupted the world and flipped it into what it should be, the proper hierarchy where he is the king. Oh, just one more example before I give the mic back to my wife. I hope you know who Kanye West is, right?
Or we hope that they don't.
Or I hope that you don't. So he is the same kind of a figure, right? So things like that operate in stories, in literature, in culture in general, but we can also notice them happen in our lives, like every day. So you have this guy who is a part of this really strange culture where everyone is a king, where everyone is a rap god, like he can call himself a rap god and the best rapper ever. But they had the whole series of him and his wife, right? You could watch them on TV. I didn't follow that, but that probably wasn't the most intellectual or intellectually demanding show to watch, right? But then again, a few years pass, and you have in Times Square, you have the biggest building, and the biggest ad says, "Jesus is King," right? And it was done by Kanye West, because that was the title of his newest album. So
the joke was that the joke was that everywhere on media, this media that, you know how media works, mass media, if they wanted to refer to a celebrity figure like Kanye West releasing his newest album, they would say Kanye West and his newest album, Jesus King, proclaiming the gospel in a way.
That's right. So the biggest and the most expensive advertisement probably in the world was saying that Jesus is King. So the upside down world, the godless world, was flipped into, and we got a glimpse of what it should be and what's the proper hierarchy. And while we're living still in this world that is upside down, we should be on the lookout for the fools, for those tricksters, so that we can notice when it's time for the hierarchy to flip back into its proper position.
So basically, we should not just, but you know this, that we should not just believe that the world is as it is presented to us. But the fools, if we look for the fools, and we have those tools, how to recognize a real fool, a holy fool, from a regular foolish person, then we may notice the signs, and we are called to read the signs of the time. And one of those signs may be the figure of the fool who is calling who is calling us to reverse the order, to say, listen guys, something is wrong with this world. And didn't Kierkegaard refer to clown? Yes, I mean, there is this sentence or this short story when Kierkegaard said that let's imagine a fire breaks out in a theater, and the clown comes and he warns public, and they all think that it's a joke. So no one runs away, and they just applaud the clown who warns them, listen, there is danger. When he repeats this, the acclaim is even bigger, but no one moves. And Kierkegaard says, this is how the world will come to an end. The general applause from wits who believe it's a joke. And now the microphone goes to you, and we can try to discuss how in our world of madness, because the title of the talk is Fools in the Types of Madness, how in those times of madness we can tell apart a regular fool from the holy fool. Or if you have any other questions concerning this talk, we are here for you. Oh, and of course, not every fool is a holy fool, right? So that needs to be emphasized.
Most people are just full.
Most people are just and I know that baby cries when they are born into the world of into the stage of fools. I experienced this like 3 months ago. He cried.
Okay, so how can we tell apart
This is what
a regular fool from the holy fool? That's the question we would have to you, but you can also ask questions from what I'm told.
Yeah, as a proponent of all things cancel culture, no, I guess the question I would ask is like, do you think that there should be some things that are off limits for at least a time to joke about? Or should it be a sign of a healthy freedom that we can always make jokes about every topic? That's my question.
So we're getting into this First Amendment talk now. Yeah, that's a good question, because the idea is, I think, there's a difference between whether you can joke about something, and another thing is if you should, right? And yeah, if you have a properly working hierarchy, there shouldn't be jokes about it because it's working properly, right? The jester shows that the king is naked, and it depends on the king whether it is a good or a bad thing. If you have a good, very wise and loving king, flipping it upside down is not a good idea. But if you have a corrupt, wrongdoing king, it needs to be exposed. Anyone? That makes us look really foolish if you don't have questions. A comment, please.
I think it's for the first time that I thought I would love to be a fool, because I think I never allowed myself to be a fool, really. And at the same time, I think it can be really dangerous.
Oh, definitely.
Because if you're a citizen or a member of an institution and you have corrupt leaders and you're the person who exposes that, so that can become really dangerous. And so it would be a mixed blessing to be a fool. It can be perhaps some kind of calling to point on something that is really wrong in leaders or in leadership. I don't know the answer, but because I was thinking of some examples where I would love to expose all this corruption, but it is dangerous. But I think it would help if we could do it in little foolish ways, so not taking ourselves too seriously. That might perhaps help. So I'd like to hear your comments on that, because you're the experts
Okay, so yes, this is the whole talk was not to say that we should be fools and act foolishly, or that it is a calling for everyone to be a fool, because, as you said, it is a very dangerous enterprise. And like we can say that 99% of fools end up being just fools and not holy fools. And yeah, and it's if you consider that those trolls or those tricksters being from two different worlds, it is really easy to like fall into the side of absolute chaos rather than being the agent of restoration. So it's really reserved for few, and I think that it's only by God's grace that someone's foolish acts flip the hierarchy back into normal. So it's not something that we should like pursue and try doing. And another thing is that since we could agree maybe that we live in the upside down world right now, we see that everyone is challenging the king, right? Everyone's pointing out problems with the authority. And it might be the false way now to become the one person that is obedient. Because it might be foolish in today's world to be just obedient to the authority, because everyone's challenging authority these days, right? Chris?
So maybe you said this, but like I'm trying to think of how to like draw the line between like thinking of being the fool in a sense and the fool in the sense of being childlike.
Mm-hmm.
And so like where's the sense in like if I act childlike, people are gonna call me a fool, but we're called to be childlike, or it's just like stuff like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that's the very same problem that you have when you have the question in the Bible what it means to be childlike. Because in one passage you are supposed to be like a child, but in the other in 1 Corinthians, I think it's 14, starting 14, that when I was a child I drank milk, yeah, and when I'm an adult I eat adult food. So there are those aspects of childhood that are supposed to be preserved or developed actually, and there are others that are the immaturity that are supposed to be gone on the way to development, to sanctity, right? So it's the very same problem. So if you know the answer, what's childlike things you should cherish, then you know what it means also with the foolishness. It's basically more or less something similar, right?
I'm not sure if I have a question or just
Or the answer.
or just a few random thoughts strung together. But I'm reminded here of two figures, a philosopher and a literary figure, a novelist actually. So Gustave Flaubert, the author of Madame Bovary, he's a great writer and it is a great work, but it is also a work about foolishness. And the philosopher now who focuses on the foolishness of Flaubert is Jean-Paul Sartre. He wrote 3 thick volumes called L'Idiot de la Famille, so the family idiot, because poor Gustave Flaubert was known as the family idiot. His parents really thought that he was an idiot, and they would see him fall for the fooliest of tricks time and time again. In any case, so for example, the cook would come to the little Gustave and say, "Please go to the next room and find me." And Gustave would just go to the next room and come back and say, "But I didn't find you there." Where it's like, "Of course, you idiot." So, not a happy childhood, certainly not a happy childhood. And then he would also see his parents denigrate other people who would use all these cliches and have a simple or lame way of speaking, and they would say, "Well, gosh, these people are full of stupidity, they just say stupid things." In any case, Gustave became aware of his foolishness and really tried to overcome it, not from the standpoint of intellectualism. He didn't want to become himself a polished intellectual, but he wanted rather to acknowledge it seriously and see it as a possibility, as a calling for life, as something to be taken seriously, as a condition that ended up making him into a great artist. Again, one of the greatest novelists that ever lived, Gustave Flaubert. So two things. First, I agree with you that foolishness is not something to be tried for fun. I think it is more something that just happens to us, and it can happen nearly to everybody sporadically, and to some people more often than they would want, right? But like none of us is really vaccinated against foolishness. We can catch it, or it's more like it catches us, right? We are beholden to it, and then we are revealed as a fool and put into a complete position of vulnerability, and it's awful. But the good news, or like the gospel of foolishness, is that maybe you can turn it around. You can embrace a moment of foolishness, perhaps with humility, or a condition of foolishness as a possibility, right? So it becomes a task. And I'm very interested about what you're proposing, that like all things, cleverness, prudence, thoughtfulness, like all good things, even foolishness is also called into sanctification. Like it has a place in the kingdom of God. If you only have faith like a mustard seed or like a child, right? So if you're afflicted by this, or if it happens to you, it's like, oh my gosh, here we go again. I just sounded like a perfect idiot, right? I've been rendered vulnerable by it. It's like, welcome to the club, you know. And I like this, what you're mentioning, that if your foolishness affects you, take that as an opportunity to call for grace. Like offer that up to God. See what He actually wants to bring about through it, because it could be something like the revelation of truth, of a salvific truth. So you might be telling something that somebody else needs to hear and will make the day for that person. Or it could be like performing a courageous deed that you would never otherwise dare to do, and that will save a life, can change another person's life. So anyhow, I'm much comforted by this suggestion, and I wonder if you seconded, objected, amended, take it forward.
World in different aspects, upside down world of our own self, of our own being, and turning, as you said, the foolishness that happens to me becomes the symbolism that happens to me. And I mean, I agree with you, Javier, that it might become a cult. So we were talking here maybe in large terms about like, look out for fools in the world, because we live in the end times, or we live in this upside down world. But like, if we notice the fool in ourselves, that's a call, well, to flip again and to turn to God. And in a way, no one really wants to wear those large shoes, right? No one wants to be in those large shoes of a clown. Sometimes it's a disguise. Sometimes it's chosen. But as in the movie, the movie Island, Ostrov, there is the character of the superior of Father Anatoly, who is, well, Father Anatoly plays pranks and tricks all the time on his superior. And his superior is one of those very orderly people who follows the rules and is very disturbed by all those pranks. He doesn't like them, and he gets a bit jealous about Father Anatoly, who is so foolish, and yet at the same time he seems to be prophetic, and people are drawn to this fool. And the lesson that he learns in the end is it's not important whether you happen to be a fool or not. What is important is love, and the way you love God, and ways are different, and calls are different, and gifts are different. Does it make sense?
Time for one final question
Or remark.
or remark.
I want to hear more about Christ as the fool, because I think that there's like some parables that he talks about that he kind of sounds like a crazy person a little bit. Like when he's talking about like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna leave 99 sheep and go find one sheep. I don't know, but like anybody has thoughts on that. Because I think that like there's something about really, really loving people and really, really like having a lot of like love that people look at that and they like look down on it and they're like, oh, you're such a fool. So I don't know.
Yeah, it definitely goes against any kind of economy to leave 99 sheeps and go for that one. Yeah, also so when he is in front of Pilate, right, there is one person who can tell the truth to Pilate, that he is, like, his power was given to him. And that's also like what the jester does. Yeah, you are not a tyrant, you're not God, because there is God above you. So that's another moment when we can see Christ as this person as this jester that tells the truth to the person that considers himself equal to God, right? And the same with Pharisees. Every time there is something about them where they see that they are the givers of law, Jesus just flips it over, talking to them like, you're just graves, whitened graves, right? Yeah, like, let's not consider it in its totality. There are those glimpses of this being the jester, the trickster, the clown. Like, we cannot say, okay, Jesus is a clown, right? Let's not go this far, but there are those attributes of those figures that are represented in Christ, because Christ is everything. So yeah, a sage, a wise man, a king, a god.
So would you say like we're not called to be fools, but we are called to have aspects of the fool?
Well, we're called to be, humble, just as Dr. Carreño said, and all the usual Catholic Christian stuff. And when it happens that we turn out fools, that we do something foolish, we need to be humble about it, and and humility is the way for this, that in this way God can make a good use of our foolishness and make something good out of it.
If we were to say again or bring together all those aspects of fools, because we're trying to say that, acting foolishly does not mean necessarily that you are the fool, right? Those aspects that we discussed as we were just going through those different types of figures of the fool in culture, in literature, were remembering about our transience, remembering that one day we will die, and the question is if it's the new beginning, right? Remembering about telling the truth, being faithful, being humble, loving God, following the wisdom of the cross. So these are the aspects that we try to show as being associated with the fool who becomes to restore order and hierarchy. And the question that you asked, leaving 99 and going for the one, in real life, in the novel, in The Idiot, this is exactly what Prince Myshkin does, right? And this is what loving is, loving a person unconditionally because that's not even a romantic love, no gain from this, is seen by the society as madness and foolishness.
Yes.
And this is what we as Christians are to face, right? But as St. Paul says, for the wisdom of the world is foolishness in God's sight. And the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. In the context of death, this foolishness, loving God and your neighbor, becomes the gateway to another to life, right? Does it make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, you do kind of have to do the opposite of what you're trying to do.
It's all about paradoxes, but in the end, it's all about love.
Even falling in love is kind of foolish.
Oh my
But-
gosh, it is foolish.
But like, why wouldn't you be accessory to it?
Yeah, you fall in love, so it has this aspect of death.
And life.
Okay.
Okay, so
Yes, that's it. Thank you so much for being patient. And don't go and don't watch the horrors with clowns. Rather, if anything, The Island, Pavel Lungin Ostrov, a really good movie. Or read your home assignment for tomorrow. Good night.
good night, thank you.